So after the failure of Spider-Man 3, shockingly enough, Sony decided to move forward with a reboot, and you got The Amazing Spider-Man, which of course is the full title of the long-running comic book that Spider-Man. There have been others, Spectacular Spider-Man, stuff like that, but Amazing Spider-Man, of course, spinning out of Amazing Fantasy, the anthology that was a failed series, and its last stories was Spider-Man, and oh, good Lord, look what you found. So they got Andrew Garfield to play the role. Now, Andrew Garfield, other than probably being a little too tall for the role, in some ways his face kind of matches the comic book versions of Peter Parker than the other two that we've seen. But and some elements in Amazing Spider-Man, it's not that bad. It's just that a lot of it is just completely unnecessary. It's too much of a redo of the Sam Raimi, the first Spider-Man. Instead of Green Goblin, you have the Lizard. You have the whole origin story told again. Oh, what's happening to me and all this stuff. And they go much further into him discovering the powers and all that. And but it just like, all right. And it's like, if it had been, I don't know, 20 years later, maybe you could do it. And some of this is like how the MCU handled their second Hulk film, which, was the one with Ed Norton in it and all that, where the opening credits tells you the origin. You didn't need the origin anymore. And I thought that was would have been a good thing here. They brought in the elements of the parents, which in the comics is later revealed they were agents and, were killed because of that. And all this type of stuff. Here, it's because Peter's father was involved in these experiments that ultimately leads to Peter's powers, and everything is, put together with Oscorp at the center of everything. That's not the comic book story, but it makes sense to some extent like that. It's kind of like the animated Superman 90s cartoon where they made Brainiac a Kryptonian computer. That's not the story at all, but boy, does it work. So here, with obviously they're setting up a Norman Osborn that was supposed to appear down the road. They keep him in shadow and everything, and all of that through this film. And then, of course, Kurt Connors working there, not being the professor of Peters, and so on and so forth. Gwen Stacy is introduced this time around, so they try to shake it up a little, because even though Mary Jane ultimately becomes Peter's wife and all that sort of stuff, Gwen Stacy was the first big deal love of his life, who ends up dying at the hands of the Green Goblin, and so on and so. Well, kind of, sort of, depending on how you look at it. So it was, that's all well and good and stuff. And there was talk that they were going to introduce a Mary Jane. Apparently, there was scenes shot with an actress in the next movie, and they cut it all out. But so yeah, you would get there. But the deal was Gwen Stacy's one of these characters who becomes more significant dead than she did alive. And she sort of haunts, especially Mary Jane, who is always feels like she was second best, and she was never going to be able to compete with Gwen Stacy and all this. Despite the other girlfriends Peter had, Gwen is the one that troubles her the most. And the idea was that Mary Jane actually had a crush on Peter much longer and earlier than the other way around. So, but none of that is here. It's just Gwen Stacy's there. She's got her eye on Peter. She feels sorry for him. He's picked on. They actually have a very good Flash Thompson. This is the most accurate Flash Thompson that any of and that includes the Raimi films. This one, even though personality-wise they're kind of similar, but even the beginnings of a potential friendship down the road is there as well. And also, it's a brief scene, but there's the indications of Flash Thompson likes Spider-Man. He looks up to Spider-Man and all that stuff. So there's a lot of good in here. The Lizard, he doesn't look like they wanted to keep him probably thought it was too far-fetched to put the alligator head on him. But for all intents and purposes, it's not bad, you know. And it all pursues it. You know, he's missing his arm, the desire that he could unlock the secret of cellular regeneration. He could do it. The upshot of it is Norman Osborn wants a cure for some illness that he has. He's dying, and that's the whole point of this, formula, what have you, that Connors is working on. Richard Parker apparently was the smarter of the two, or more talented or whatever, and had the algorithm that could do it. Maybe. And that becomes the sort of central plot of it. It's also apparently an overarching plot for other films for it that they were working on, and all that sort of stuff. And probably, I can't remember if the second film revealed this or not, that as a result of that not just anybody could have been bitten by that spider and develop the powers. It was Peter, because anyway, we'll get into that for the next one. But anyway, so it's the same plot points and whatnot, you know. And then there's the difficulty that he's having with Uncle Ben, and then Uncle Ben dies, you know, and oh no, and you know. The criminal here clearly kills him, so there's none of this going to rewrite that. So they got that going for him. Flint Marko didn't show up to accidentally shoot him. No, that's that. And again, this is the lesson of Peter Parker getting arrogant and whatnot, and so on and so forth, which is all fine and dandy, but it's like it was only a couple of years ago and he saw the same movie, you know. It just doesn't work out that well. There's other elements where they get him to figure out the costume and stuff. They remove the wrestling stuff completely. You know, I mean, you can go either way, but at this point, again, since you're retelling the movie and just changing things here and there, it doesn't matter, and it's kind of stupid, and it's the reason why you're doing it. No, it's a different movie, and no, it isn't. It's just a copy of the other one with a few deck chairs shuffled around. And this time the girl's blonde, you know, and no, that doesn't work. But overall, the performances are fine. Garfield does all right, and in some ways he probably does it better. They're brief scenes, but it's that aspect of Spider-Man that they do in the Raimi films, but it's just not as good as this one, where, you know, Spider-Man's a bit of a smartass. You know, he makes fun of the criminals he's dealing with. He rather kind of torments them with it, with his jokes and stuff. And there's a scene there where he's taken down this, a car thief, and all of that. And, you know, he's making fun of him, and he's making jokes about his webs, like he's sneezing it out and all that stuff. You know, and it's fine. So that aspect of it gets kind of lost in the whole thing about, well, it's just a redo of the other movie, and, you know, why didn't, and some people were probably even at the time still upset that they weren't going to continue with Raimi's Spider-Man 4, stuff like that, you know, and so that's weighing on it. And so some of the performance that he did, it's lost in it. The costume, they give more detail of him developing it, but still I'm kind of at a loss. But they do the web shooters, and he's not in the MCU per se, but there's all this weird stuff going on. There's the experiment stuff, there's Oscorp and all its technology and all that. And so and Peter's very much into it, and there's quite a bit more indication of his, you know, genius level intellect in pursuit of a scientist career that he would have had he not become Spider-Man. But it's all there, and he's like a chip off the old block, you know. You know, Kurt Connors recognizes this, you know, and then he becomes sort of another father figure for a bit here, and they keep doing that with these themes, but it you know, it's appropriate to the narrative. And that he's seeing his old friend Richard in Peter, so he's fascinated with Peter in that aspect of it. But ultimately, he's going to turn into a monster, and it's an act of desperation in that he has to find to see if this works, because and really what Kurt Connors did, he doesn't want to experiment on some poor bastard that Osborn was wanting to have happen, through his muscle man there or whatever, henchman, I guess. And so Kurt does it to himself, but of course the results are it really changes you very much like the Venom suit did in that other movie. So but that is the Lizard story. He's trying to achieve cellular regeneration, and the consequences, of course, he turns into his own version of Mr. Hyde. And they're off to the problem. And then, of course, humanity is weak and pathetic, and I'm going to change them all into lizards. And he has the dispersal ability now, and that becomes the big chase, which drags on way too long for him to get there for the battle at the end. Captain Stacy brought in fits in, but he's kind of a fill-in for J. Jonah Jameson. And then I don't like this Spider-Man. I think he's a criminal. He wears a mask and all that sort of stuff. But it does refer to the reference refer to the reference of the comics. I mean, Captain Stacy was his character, and he does die, and Peter, he's all broken up about it. It's the father of the girl he loves, and all this sort of stuff. And of course, it sets up this thing of, you gotta stay away from Gwen, please don't bring her into this, and all that sort of stuff. And then he dies, and so he's, no, I'm compelled not to. Of course, that ain't gonna happen. And then, what happens in the next movie? Yeah, so. But, it's a movie that, the worst part about it is unnecessary. They should have gone, just forget about the origin aspects of it. You could have, like I said, you introduce that in the credits of the opening. And deal more with Kurt Connors and all of that. I mean, I guess the business about Peter's parents could have been weaved into it, and maybe that would have made a more tighter and solid film than this one that's a bit scattered and redoing stuff. And it probably might have worked better. I guess the idea of the costume looking so different was another aspect of that, of just, hey, paint it differently. They won't notice it's the same movie. Well, it didn't work, so yeah. And I'm a huge fan of James Horner, and it's kind of sad because I think this was his last project before he died. But it's not that great, and it doesn't hold a candle to Danny Elfman, who has the best musical score for a Spider-Man film, and theme. I know they use the old 60s thing for the MCU version, and that's all well and good, but the rest of it's all pretty much forgettable, and that's unfortunate. But James Horner has done a lot of great music. They did some great work for Star Trek and all that, and Willow and stuff like that. Titanic, I know everybody loves it. Well, okay. But he was one of the great composers. He's very repetitive. You instantly recognize his stuff, but he's typically pretty good. His Cocoon music is extraordinarily beautiful. And the Rocketeer, which is one of the all-time great comic book films, that's a great theme too. But here in Spider-Man, and not so much. But what are you going to do? So it's not a horrible film, but it's ultimately, again, rather unnecessary. And that's too bad, because there's a lot of aspects there, kind of teases it could have been something. But, there you are. So there's The Amazing Spider-Man. Thanks for watching and listening. Say, while you're still here, why not like and subscribe and share with your many friends? Yes. Also, check out my many stores in the link description below. Yes, where you can get t-shirts, hats, mugs, all those goodies with my artwork on them. Oh, yeah. And head over to indieplanet.com and pick up a copy of my comic book, Night Night. Oh, yeah. You can also catch me at my podcast, Mr Nailsin Show, on RadioMisfits.com. And you can also watch my videos on BitChute.com and now on Rumble.com. Oh, my goodness. So many places to watch me and my stuff. Oh, yeah. And if that's not enough for you, well, you can follow me on many social media platforms and say hi to your old pal, Mr. Nailsin.